Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about credit versus debit and which one you should be using. There can be some controversies between the two, but first of all, let's break down the pros and cons of each one. The pros of a credit card primarily are that it's very safe compared to a debit card and you get rewards. When I say it's safe, I mean if you ever get hacked, a credit card company is more liable to refund you the money if it was a fraudulent charge. This has happened to me before where I've had hundreds of dollars spent on my credit card and all I had to do was tell the credit card issuer that I did not make those charges and they refunded me the money. And there are laws set up in place to protect consumers when they're using credit cards. Those laws don't always apply to debit cards though. A negative in terms of credit cards is that it allows you to spend money that you don't have. That is probably the biggest hang-up for credit cards overall. I can spend money today and pay for it tomorrow or pay for it in 30 days. The challenge here is that it's so much easier mentally to swipe your card when you know, oh, I'll just pay for that in the future. You don't owe that money today. It's not coming directly out of your bank account today, so it's a lot easier to swipe your card. It's not until 30 days later that it catches up with you and you recognize, maybe I shouldn't have spent that much money. So what are the pros and cons of a debit card? Well, a debit card keeps you a lot more accountable because as soon as you swipe the card, the money is then leaving your account. So you feel that pain when you purchase. Whenever you purchase an item and those dollars leave your account, you kind of feel more pain when that happens versus a credit card where you don't feel that pain for another 30 days. That's why some say it's actually best to pay in cash because if you see the actual dollars, physical dollars leaving your hand, you're a lot more conscious as to what you're spending when you see the money leaving. Debit cards are the next best thing from cash in terms of holding yourself accountable to what you're spending. Another pro for debit cards is that sometimes they're a lot cheaper in terms of online transactions. Sometimes if you go to pay for a bill, if you use a credit card, it charges you a fee versus a debit card or directly to your checking account, it's oftentimes much cheaper. Two negative aspects of debit cards though is that they're one, you don't get any rewards, and two, they're not nearly as safe. As I mentioned previously, credit cards have laws around them to protect consumers. Those laws don't apply in the same way to a debit card, so if your debit card gets stolen and transactions are made that you did not make, you're going to have a little bit of a harder time getting that money back. You may have lost it completely, or the bank may reissue that money to you, but there's no laws guaranteeing that you're gonna get that money back. Now, I've also had a debit card hacked. Now, luckily, the bank did refund me that money. I'm not sure, they've likely had to go and cover that bill themselves, but the reality is that debit cards are tied directly to your checking account. So if someone gets a hold of your debit card, they essentially have a direct line into your checking account and can drain it very fast. So they're not nearly as safe. So you may be wondering, which one do I use? It seems more responsible to use the debit card in terms of keeping yourself financially responsible. But on the other hand, it seems more responsible to use a credit card in terms of safety. So that leaves you asking the question, which one is best to use? Personally, I like the perks of each one. I like being held accountable by using a debit card. It keeps me honest because it can be very easy to start spending ahead of what you're earning and then forget that, hey, I've got this bill coming due and now I need to cover for this expense that I took out before I even had the money in my account. That can be very dangerous. And that is why credit card debt is so high today. It is so easy to spend the money. That's why I like debit cards, because they keep you accountable. But I've also been hacked, and I recognize, hey, I need that safety net. If I'm ever hacked, I want to make sure that someone doesn't have a direct access to my checking account and that I can just log in and mark a charge as being fraudulent and get my money returned. So personally, I use a credit card, but I use it as a debit card. Let me explain. To walk you through how I use a credit card like a debit card, let me first explain that I use a budgeting tool called YNAB. It's YNAB and it stands for You Need a Budget. Essentially, you take your paycheck and you allocate every single dollar to a category. You have your different envelopes, so to speak. So you have your different buckets or your different envelopes that you're putting money in. You may have rent, you may have groceries, you may have gas. Whatever the case is, you allocate every dollar that you have into a category. So say I get my paycheck and I allocate $50 towards my gas fund. And then I drive to the gas station and I take my credit card and I swipe the credit card and I pay $50 in gas. Well, I know that I have $50 budgeted towards gas, but that $50 isn't coming out of my account today. It's going to come out of my credit card 30 days from now, or the next pay cycle. What the app helps me do is take the $50 that I had budgeted and it moves it to a different category. So if you have an envelope for gas and you have $50 tucked away in that envelope, it is taking the $50 out of that envelope and it's moving it to my credit card category or my credit card envelope. So you have every item in your budgeting tool lined up, including all your credit cards. So if I'm spending on a credit card, it's taking it out of the dollars that I've already budgeted for and it's moving it to the credit card. So fast forward 1 month and my credit card is now due. I already have $50 allocated towards that gas that I spent a month ago. It's simply setting up your budget in all your different categories and you're moving money around. Rather than spending it today and having it coming out of the account today, it's simply moving to another category to be reserved for when your credit card is due. Now, prior to this method, I actually used to use a tool. There's multiple tools out there. One was called Debit and one was called Debit, and one of them bought the other company and now neither of them exist. But this is how it used to work. You would take your checking account and you take your credit card and you sync them to, say, your Debit account. So now there's an account in the middle that was FDI insured. And so when you spent money on your credit card, say you spent $50 in gas, it would immediately take $50 out of your checking account and pull it into their account. That was, again, it was an insured account, so you knew you were guaranteed that money. And then when the bill was due, it would take it and pay your bill. So as you're swiping your credit card throughout the month, it is routinely taking out that same amount into the Debit account and out of your checking account. So you felt the pain up front of that, of what you're spending coming directly out of your account, but you're able to spend in a much safer way using a credit card and you're getting those points. So you go throughout the month and you're using your credit card, it's pulling out of your checking account, then once the bill is due, it would pay the bill and you're all set. Sadly, each of those companies bought each other and then another company came along and bought the last one and everything was shut down. So those services no longer exist. I found that to be very helpful, and so when that service went away, I was scrambling trying to find a method to use a credit card like a debit card, and that's where I came up with using my budgeting tool to help. So that all makes sense. If you understand the whole categories and money being transferred around, you can start to recognize that that's actually a pretty straightforward way to use a credit card like a debit card. But what was the biggest challenge that I ran into? The biggest challenge for me with either of these processes was getting off of this concept called credit card float. You're spending money on your credit card today, but you're not paying for it for a month from now. So what that meant was we were actually a month behind in our bills. We would pay everything on a credit card, and then I would get paid a month later and I would cover that cost. But if all of a sudden I lost my job, I wouldn't be able to cover that because I wouldn't have that paycheck the next month to cover those bills. So we were a month ahead in what we owed and a month behind in paying. But using credit card float or that 30-day wait period, we were able to make it work. Now, trying to break that cycle was a challenge. But now that we're over that period of time and we're using a credit card truly like a debit card, the benefits that we're seeing is, one, you get great visibility into all of your accounts, not just your checking account. You know exactly where you're standing with even all of your credit cards. You also get the security of using a credit card. So if I'm making purchases online, I'm not nearly as concerned because I know if there's any fraudulent charges that come up, I can mark them as fraudulent and get my money back. Also, I'm getting the rewards. I use a variety of credit cards and they offer different rewards, and I'm able to partake in those rewards because I'm using the credit cards. So I would ask, what are you using? Do you use cash? Do you use credit card, or do you use a debit card? And why are you using them? And has this video helped you see the value of using a credit card like a debit card? Now be careful, you don't want to get stuck in that credit card float where you're spending more today and you're paying for it later. That's very easy to get stuck in that cycle, and then you have to catch up with your bills to get back to where you should be. So if you're using cash or debit cards today, just be aware that that's a real possibility to overspend. But hopefully this has given you some insight that you can make both of them work. You can use the benefit of each of them by using the process that I just explained. And again, I've found great value in using my credit card like a debit card for the variety of reasons that I explained. You get the benefits of both. You feel the pain and you know the accountability that you have when you're spending on a credit card, because I know if I swipe today and I'm using my budgeting tool, it's going to account for those dollars today. So I'm going to feel that pain. I see those dollars leaving my account, so to speak, because my gas category no longer has any money in it because it's now been accounted for in my credit card bill. And so I no longer have $50 to spend. So I can feel that upfront pain, but I also get the safety of using my credit card. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, I ask that you please like and subscribe. Thank you.